A rogue U.S. general tries to start a nuclear war with Russia, and only a handful of people can prevent the end of the world. It's our 400th episode, and we're talking about modern conspiracy theories, penises that don't work, and the most fun city you can visit in Texas. Then we find out if Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with the glutton. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time. My name is Alan Noah. Your name is James Brief, and it is episode 400!
Yay!
400 episodes, James. This is a big deal.
And I think we're going to review the movie about the 400 Spartan soldiers that held off the Persians at the cliffs of Thermopylae.
No, you're thinking about 100 episodes ago when for episode 300 we did the movie 300. And I did actually look up to see if there were any movies with 400 in the title. And there was one I found, but I don't think it was 15 years old. And it was some like F-level movie that I'd never heard of. I think Brandon Routh was in it. I was like, this seems really stupid.
My dad, he was raised in Paris till he was 17, and he used to talk about these French films, and he watched French films even today. And there's a movie called The 400 Blows. It's a famous film, but not one we do for the 400th episode. You know, someday we'll do maybe French films.
Yeah, maybe once we get to like episode 1700 and we're just kind of like out of ideas, maybe.
Well, by the time we get to episode 1700, we'll have all the, like, 2010 films to review, and that'll be a lot of fun, you know?
Right. Along those lines, on the occasion of episode 400, is there anything in particular that you want to do on the podcast in the next 50, 100, whatever number of episodes?
You know, I'd love to hear what you have to say first, Al. What are you looking forward to?
Okay, fair. I would like to do a lot of those movies that we say we'll get to someday, and not in the way that you just kind of said about that French movie that your dad liked, because that's kind of one that I'm okay with having on the back burner. But I feel like there are so many movies that we say that about that I really want to do. I want to actually do these movies. Let's just do the movies that we really want to do. There are a lot on the list that I'm pretty excited about doing. Some great movies, some I think are pretty terrible, but I just haven't seen in a long time. There's also a lot of guests that I want to have on the show. A lot of guests I'd like to have back on the show. Adam Pincus, I think, was our first guest to join the Five Timers Club, and it's been ages since he's been on. I was texting with him earlier. I'm like, come back on the show, Adam. Kevin Smokler, I love that guy. How come we haven't had him back on in ages? So part of it is just like bringing people back, getting to some movies that we just really want to do. Yeah, I feel like let's just go for it, man.
I think as we go for the next 400 episodes, I think we'll slowly, the listeners won't notice it, but we'll steer more towards a crypto bro podcast. You know,
no.
Ever so slightly. You know what is going to stand the test of time? It's going to be Long Island coin. That one's going to the moon, folks. To the moon.
Oh, no, I hate that idea. Let's not do that. I also kind of like the idea of doing episodes based on things that are happening in the real world. Like we do a lot of movies that are coming out, like, oh, there's a new one, so we'll go back and watch the old one. And I know this wasn't a fun example, but I am proud of the fact that we did Schindler's List. That was also tied to the anniversary, but also with everything going on in the world, it felt timely. And I hope there will be other occasions to do movies that are timely that will not be as depressing, maybe, in a happier, more celebratory way. No examples are springing to mind right now, but it could happen.
Something I do like is that, we are able to watch films that I probably never would have watched before. Even movies I didn't particularly like. I didn't really find the first Halloween that interesting. Or the Steven Spielberg film that I'd never seen, Always, recently. However, then you revisit films that you hadn't seen that are so much better than they were. Dazed and Confused, a movie that I was very happy to watch. That this was last year, A Night at the Roxbury. I had very low expectations, and I laughed a few times. And I was like, I never would have seen this film. So that's something I like when a guest comes on and they go, "Can we review this random film that I don't know anything about?" And I'll go, "All right, sure." And that's what I've enjoyed the most about this podcast. And I think I'd like to do that again. Kind of watching films that are a little out of my interest. I like getting that variety of not just stuff I like. And the guests, very fun. If I'm talking strictly about the movies and the experience of doing it, it's exposing myself to things I never would have done in the past.
Yeah. Watching a movie that is new and interesting, even if I don't like it, I can still kind of chalk it up to a good experience. And hey, now I know this movie that I didn't know before, and that's still a win. But I do also really enjoy revisiting some of these movies that I've only seen once or twice, and I kind of vaguely remember liking it, but I don't really remember a lot about it, which is exactly what my experience was with Dr. Strangelove. I watched this movie maybe around 20 years ago. I was on a kick where I was watching a bunch of movies that the Simpsons writers talked about on their DVD commentaries, because I was listening to all of the Simpsons episodes without the commentary and then with the commentary. And this was one that kind of came up, that they loved Dr. Strangelove. This was a brilliant comedy that influenced them. And I was like, I've never watched that movie. I should get it on Netflix. And I got it on the DVD version of Netflix. It was that long ago. And I remember liking it, but just hadn't really seen it or thought about it in a long time. And it did kind of seem like a good movie to do for episode 400. I think we missed the 60th anniversary. I think that was earlier in the year. So oops, but whatever, close enough. You said you'd seen this movie once before too, right?
Yeah, and I think it's somewhat of a similar story to you. I think
Okay.
It was like my 20s. I think I was just kind of watching movies that I think you're supposed to love. And I will say that I didn't quite get this film when I first watched it 20 years ago. I definitely I had a different experience watching it this time. There was one piece of trivia I want to ask you for episode 400. Do you know what the longest title of any film we've reviewed is?
You mean before this movie? Or is that the answer? It's this movie?
That's correct. That's the answer.
Yeah, okay. Yes. And I have been thinking, how the hell am I going to fit this on the episode artwork, Dr. Strangelove? Or, how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb. I'm going to have to use a very small font size to fit that all in. I think just as we're talking about it, we can just call it Dr. Strangelove because everyone knows what we mean. But yeah, the full title is really, really long.
Yes, but at least the full title, it's not Dr. Strangelove, parentheses, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Mr. Kubrick is giving you a choice.
Yes.
So I think we are free to just call it Dr. Strangelove.
Right. I think that's fair. Maybe when we record the intro, maybe we should just say Dr. Strangelove. Otherwise, we're going to have a very, very long piece of music. I don't know, whatever. We'll worry about that later. But James, why don't you tell our listeners what this movie is about if they haven't seen Dr. Strangelove? Or, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
All right. Well, this film is director Stanley Kubrick's take on the Cold War and the fears of a nuclear Armageddon between the Soviet Union and the United States. When an unhinged U.S. Air Force General, General Ripper, orders a first-strike nuclear attack, believing that the communists are poisoning Americans by fluorinating the water supply, General Turgeson advises the President of the United States that the best course of action is to go forward with the attacks and destroy Russia. But President Muffley wants to recall the order and prevent a global holocaust. This proves difficult, as Ripper has locked down his base, and Major Kong, the pilot of a bomber jet flying into the USSR, is determined to destroy his targets. And in the war room, a bizarre former Nazi scientist named Dr. Strangelove has his own thoughts about the future.
Right. I know this movie is revered and kind of put on a pedestal as one of the best comedies of all time, but how did it do when it first came out?
Well, box office records and stats are very hazy when you get before the late 70s. But this film, by some records, cost up to $2 million to make, $1.8 million I'd seen. But in the box office alone, it made $9.1 million in its initial run.
Okay.
This is one of these films that had several re-releases because in the days before home video, that's really the only way to see it if you missed the initial theater run. So it does appear that even on its first run, this was quite successful.
Okay.
It was released on January 24th, 1964, after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November of 1963. And this film, all about Cold War, the fears and nuclear Armageddon, was about to be released. I think it was going to be November 1963, but the producers wisely pushed it back. And having experienced September 11th, I could see that, a real espionage thriller about a building blowing up would not be the best thing to be released on September 15th, 2001.
Well, it's a little bit different, though, because this movie isn't about a presidential assassination. This movie is about global conflict and things like that. And I mean, I get it. I understand your point. The president of the United States is a main character in this movie, so still might feel a little too close to home.
I think the subject is just very heavy because at the time, who knows who killed him? This guy Jack Ruby kills the Lee Harvey Oswald, so we don't know what's going on. Was it, quote unquote, the Russians? This is not the best time for American stability. People aren't really sure what's going to go on with the world. Kennedy had just had the Cuban Missile Crisis, in which America had just missed nuclear Armageddon. Really, it came down to a couple people that basically changed the difference between attacking Cuba with nuclear missiles in the 60s. This fear was definitely in people's minds, but this really it's a black comedy. And by that I mean, it's very dark humor, and you kind of have Peter Sellers, who I don't really know him very well, but I know he was one of the greats, and I know he eventually was the Pink Panther,
right? Inspector Clouseau,
who was a very, very famous comedic role. I think there were probably like 4 of those or something.
5. Similarly, I don't know a lot about Peter Sellers. I've seen maybe 1 or 2 of the original Pink Panther movies, but I know that he is revered as being a very funny guy. Also, this movie is directed by Stanley Kubrick, who I do not at all associate with comedy. When I think of Stanley Kubrick, I think of 2001, A Space Odyssey. I think of Full Metal Jacket. I think of movies that are really fucking serious. And this movie is really fucking funny. And that's fine. A talented filmmaker can do any number of genres, of course. But I really forgot just how funny this movie is and how weird that is for me, at least in my mind, to have that level of comedy come from director Stanley Kubrick.
It's fascinating that he was able to do this. And I think that Stanley Kubrick is one of those people that it's a real shame that he passed away when he did. Eyes Wide Shut was his last film, and right. That's late 90s, right?
Yeah.
He did not do a CGI film. And it would have been fascinating to see what he would have done with just something in the 2000s.
Yeah, definitely. It's worth it to mention that when Stanley Kubrick was first brainstorming what this movie was going to be, it wasn't originally conceived as a comedy. It was going to be a very serious look at, the threat of nuclear war. But then as he was kind of kicking around all of these ideas, smart men in a room talking about these things, he found that there was just comedy inherent in it. And he was like, well, I could write around the comedy or I could lean into it. And that was what he ultimately decided to do, was to lean into it. So it seems like it was a case of the material kind of dictating the direction. It is a tough subject. And I do think from a test of time perspective, that is the one elephant in the room that today in 2024, I don't think your average American is terrified of nuclear war in the way that they were 60 years ago.
We could be a year or two away from that, though.
That is true. And it was just recently, I forget the name of the congressman who put out a thing about, oh no, there's some security threat we all need to talk about. And it was about how Russia could be detonating a nuclear bomb in space. I mean, honestly, I think if we had recorded this episode even 10 years ago in 2014, we might have said something like, no one cares about Russia. Russia's not a threat. Who's afraid of Russia? Now, in 2024, that's not the case. And I think Putin has shown just how aggressive he can be. And he is a scary guy. They have a considerable army and they are looking to do damage. Listen, I'm not a Putin expert. I don't really think he wants to start a nuclear war. I don't think that's what he's going for. Who the fuck knows? But it's just not a thing that I think people are worried about. The things that I'm more worried about are, mass shootings. I worry that if Biden wins in November, that there will be fucking riots and people doing January 6th, but times 1,000. That's the kind of shit that I worry about. There are other people in this country who worry far more about migrants crossing the border and breaking into their houses, or Obama turning all of their guns trans, or whatever the fuck they worry about. There are things that people are worried about that are not nuclear war. And to be clear, I'm not saying that nobody should be worried about nuclear war. There's still a lot of fucking nuclear weapons on this planet. This shit could happen. And someone could make a movie today in 2024 about the threat of nuclear war and say, hey, everyone, you're all sleeping on this threat, but we should be fucking scared of this.
Right. I mean, I think it's the fear of the times.
Yes.
When you look at a story like X-Men or Spider-Man that are from the mid 20th century, how did they get created? A radioactive spider, and the X-Men are the result of radiation causing mutations. But later when they do the Sam Raimi films, they call it a genetically modified spider, and X-Men is more about just general mutations causing the X-Men. It's always just something that they fear. It's not even Al-Qaeda anymore. Now it'd be something else. It could very well go back to Russia soon. Inevitably, it's just going to take one random Yahoo to just release this thing. It only works when every single person agrees not to set off these devices, which is the mutually assured destruction that basically got the U.S. and USSR through the Cold War, and that this film is basically would you call it the MacGuffin of the film, or no? It's the driving device of the film in that the Soviets have created a doomsday device that if the Soviet Union is attacked with a nuclear bomb, that this thing will automatically set off some cobalt 40 something, and this will cover the earth in the deadly radiation cloud. There is a logic to this. Do not think about this stupid idea of nuclear war. Maybe you'll win, maybe you'll lose, but if you try it, we all lose, and we guarantee it here. One of my favorite lines in the film is when the Soviet ambassador guy in the war room is explaining the doomsday device. No one knows anything about it, and Dr. Strangelove is like, yes, but what is the point of this device if you don't tell anyone about it? And the Russian ambassador is like, well, we were about to tell you this Sunday at the international conference.
Right.
It kind of sounds like something that could actually happen.
Right. I think there are a lot of things in this movie that are preposterous, but also do feel kind of grounded and believable. The whole like conspiracy theory about like the fluoridation of the water, and that's what leads Ripper to initiate this attack, that really feels believable. That definitely stands the test of time. Conspiracy theories have always existed. They were around in 1964. The fluoridation thing was an actual conspiracy theory then. Then, of course, after Kennedy was assassinated, all kinds of conspiracy theories popped up. And conspiracy theories are really fucking mainstream. One of the two political parties in this country just deals in conspiracy theories all the time. That whole like Pizzagate conspiracy theory was a joke until it wasn't, until the guy showed up at that pizza place with a gun, because of course somebody would do that. Are you familiar with Jordan Klepper, the Daily Show guy?
Oh, yeah. He's probably one of the best things about The Daily Show these days.
Yes, and he had a podcast where he like really unpacked some of the crazy conspiracy theories that he hears about, because he always goes to like the MAGA rallies and interviews people. And watching those videos of him interviewing people, that's crazy and it blows your mind. The podcast, though, was really good. I recommend it. He unpacked the theory about how Trump is still in charge of the military, even though he's not president anymore. The whole blood libel conspiracy. Like, these things are batshit insane, and people believe them. And some of the people who believe these conspiracies work in the government. That's the thing that's scary about Dr. Strangelove. It's General Ripper, a guy who has real power, real authority. He believes this shit, and so we're all gonna fucking die. And, you know, a lot of the guys who were there on January 6th, they're cops, they're government employees who believe this shit. And it's really fucking terrifying.
While watching this film, I couldn't help but think of another film. I've only seen it once, but it's a film from the 90s. Basically, it's the other side of the coin of this. But have you ever seen a film called Crimson Tide?
No, I know of it, but haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's based on a real story of something that happened in a Soviet sub. You know, these subs have nukes on them.
Yeah.
And, you know, at some point, in theory, they could have the orders to launch them. How do they confirm that these orders are correct?
Okay.
Basically. And that's basically what happens in this film. And it starts talking about, you know, the how nukes in the end are just going to be one guy. Because these planes, they have some kind of order to attack the Soviet Union. And then all the planes are recalled. But one of the planes with the guy, Slim Pickens, his plane is damaged, so they can't get the recall message. It's unfortunately too real, though, that just basically one guy could do this.
Yeah.
And I don't really believe that one guy could do this, but I think in the end, you know, there will be a guy on that submarine. You know, yeah, you might have to turn two keys or something, but it's not going to take the will of the nation to set up a nuke. And right. I like to believe that the American nuclear bombs are very, very secure. But there's a lot of countries out there, and I'm not just talking about the Russia or the former Soviet Union satellite countries that I'm not super secure. But there's a lot of other countries that either have a nuke or that we don't know that they have a nuke. And who knows how secure these things are. And these countries, you know, in the course of the next 100 years, eventually some of these countries are being taken over and will turn over to new governments. What happens during these turnovers? Who knows what happens to these bombs? Wasn't that like every 1990s, like early 2000s, like plot, like breakaway satellite country from the former Soviet Union, something sold their nukes?
Yeah, that was a thing. Yeah, I mean, these weapons are out there, and who's in charge of them? People. And people are corruptible, people are sometimes dumb, people sometimes make mistakes. The reason that Ripper has this idea about fluoridation that inspires him to launch this attack, which, you know, he doesn't know about the doomsday machine, so he's not necessarily plotting to end the world, but he's definitely hoping to annihilate Russia. It all comes because he can't get it up. It's some like weird sexual experience that he has, which leads him to this revelation about the fluoridation and the water and the commies and everything else. Like, that's petrifying and hilarious and believable, right? Like that somebody out there would have some weird thing, something doesn't work right with their dick, so millions of people die.
Well, it's not completely unbelievable because, what's the reason you don't have a job? Is it because you're not in the right area for this line of work? Your line of work, there's not available things? Or is it that fucking foreigner asshole that took your job? It's a lot easier to say it's not your fault, but it's someone else's fault, and I have nothing to do with it. So, this guy, he looks like he's in his 40s or, early 50s or something. If his dick doesn't work, could it just be, maybe he's getting older? No fucking way. It's got to be those Soviets that are doing this to me.
Right.
And you know how I could prove it? Because 10 years ago, when I was 35, this never happened. So now, with more Soviets here, I think we've seen examples of presidents doing something for their personal ego rather than necessarily in our nation's best interest.
No, that's never happened. I disagree.
Yeah, exactly. Going to wars and these things really can come down to someone being personally insulted.
Sure.
And then, entire governments can change.
Right. There are a lot of other sex jokes in this movie, too. When we first meet Turgidson, he's with his secretary, who he's clearly having an affair with. And, he takes a phone call from her when he's in the war room. And he's like, well, I'm going to make you Mrs. General Turgidson someday. And the only way that they can get the Soviet premier, they have to track him down at his girlfriend's mistress's apartment or something where he's drunk. And the final scene of the movie is everyone in the war room talking about how they're going to rebuild society by having lots and lots of sex with lots and lots of beautiful women in the mines. And then everyone's like, oh, you know what? This sounds okay, because they're all going to be included. So all of a sudden, the end of the world doesn't sound so bad because, yay, we're going to get laid. I thought that was really funny.
I thought of that scene in a different light after having seen Don't Look Up. That's the Armageddon film. And there's an asteroid heading towards Earth. They're trying to stop the asteroid, but there is also a failsafe. There's one rocket that's going to take like 50 years in like cryosleep or something, but it's going to get to some other, Earth 2, and they'll repopulate the Earth. The people picked to be on this rocket ship, it's all the senators and presidents and these people. And what did I notice? They're all old.
Yeah.
Like, if you're gonna have a repopulate the earth thing, you pretty much have to populate it with 20-somethings and teenagers pretty much, because these people have to live, I think they said it's going to be 99 years or something.
93.
So at the time when these people are ready to resurface, there's going to be people that remembered what it was like on the surface, and that's not going to be the 65-year-old president of the United States.
No.
But it's very believable to me that people would make that mistake, that choosing who to go, and obviously that's a very ethically gray area, but obviously if you did want to pick something just purely on logic, and maybe you'd pick a couple of people who know how to grow things, a couple farmers, a couple doctors, and a couple et cetera,
very subtle
plumbers.
Some doctors, huh?
Yeah, specifically pediatricians for all the young people that are there.
Sure.
This pediatrician, of course, would be exempted from the you have to be in the 20s thing.
Oh.
Right. It's would have to probably have the best accommodations.
Right. But would still not be exempt from the having lots of sex with all the beautiful women thing, right?
I think to repopulate the population of pediatricians, they should replicate the pediatricians. Yes.
Okay.
But but even if you were to take this logical, it always seems like the most logical people to be in the mines are not the young, capable people, but the war room politicians.
Right.
And I just thought that was great.
Well, and I mean, Dr. Strangelove is virtually orgasmic as he's talking about this, because this is eugenics. This is what the Nazis wanted, to create a master race. He's finally gonna get what he always wanted, and he can't stop hiling, and his hand is just, out of control. And then he's able to get up and stand, even though he was confined to a wheelchair, because he wants to have sex too. So he has to show that the lower part of his body works. And I mean, it's really funny. It's not a funny thing to talk about, but this scene is hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, do you know who Dr. Strangelove is modeled after? Do you know, like, the whole Nazi thing?
I know that he was not modeled after Kissinger, but there was some German scientist that he was based on.
So there was something called Operation Paperclip.
Yes, of course.
And the Germans had the best rockets in the world. They had just perfected the V2 rocket. And that was a rocket that from mainland Europe was basically going to be able to hit London. But of course, the Nazi regime fell apart in 1945. And the Americans and the Soviets, they both knew two things. One, we're totally buddies right now in World War II, but obviously now that Germany is gone, you and I are the two new powers, and we are not going to be friends for a while. And number two, these rockets like completely changed the tide of World War II. We want to get these motherfucking scientists. And that's how the Americans and Soviets were able to have the space race.
Right.
But Werner von Braun, he's the guy that's responsible for basically the entire Apollo and the Gemini and Mercury programs. And he was a total Nazi.
Right.
And, they kind of quietly just put all these guys in like Mississippi or something, all these Nazis. And all the other guys were tried and everything. But, these guys were like, all right, shut up and just build us rockets.
Right. I mean, it's sort of like the people who are selected to go in the mines, right? Like, if you have an in, your sins are forgiven. You can go and have the nice life. I mean, it's fucked up that these Nazis were given a pass. Turgidson even says, like, Strangelove, what kind of a name is that? And then the other guy says, oh, he changed it from the German, and I don't remember the word, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it. But he says a German name that apparently is the equivalent of Strangelove. He just made the English version of it.
Oh, that's interesting. Peter Sellers, he famously plays three roles in this film.
Right.
He plays Captain Mandrake. He's the British guy. A very reformed British guy. Yes, well, yes, good chap.
And he's very, like, self-effacing, and he knows that Ripper is batshit insane, but he's just, like, talking to him with that dry British wit and trying to calm him down and trying to get the codes to, prevent this nuclear holocaust, but he's still being very prim and proper and polite about all of it. It's very funny.
Oh, absolutely. He is a fantastic negotiator. Unfortunately, the guy kills himself.
Yeah.
But he plays the very American president, President Muffley.
President Merkin Muffley, which is really fucking funny that his first name is Merkin. I don't know if they ever say that, but I saw that on IMDb.
Oh, that I didn't catch that. But he also then plays the very German Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
And these are very, very different characters.
Yes.
And it's fantastic that he can play these roles that I actually was wondering. I knew he played Strangelove, but I had to look up who his other roles were. Because, again, not knowing who Peter Sellers was, maybe would be a little more identifiable to me had I known him. But I think these three characters are completely different looking. The president is bald. Mandrake has this like 60s military guy haircut. And Strangelove has this kind of Seth Rogen, fro. They look totally different. Obviously, wigs and makeup and everything, but just also the mannerisms, the accents. They're ridiculous, but they're so well done that they're funny. Like, the accents are funny. Even the American accent of President Mandrake it's one of my favorite lines in the entire film, conversations rather, when Sellers playing the president, he's having this conversation with the Soviet premier.
Yeah.
And we don't hear the other guys. It was just Sellers talking into a phone. It's so funny because he's basically trying to tell the Soviet premier there are nukes heading your way. It wasn't our fault. Let's work together. But 3/4 of this conversation is about the president trying to make pleasantries because Dmitri, the premier on the other side of the phone call, is more involved in whether or not the president is his friend.
You don't call to say hi. I can hear you fine. You're fine. We're all fine. It's fine to be fine. Yeah, that scene is fucking hilarious and so much funnier that we don't hear what the premier is saying. If it was on speaker, it would be far less funny.
Right, and even just from an acting point of view, maybe there's an earpiece telling him, like, you know, here's what the premier's saying, now you return a line. But I don't think he's doing it. I think it's just completely ad-libbed. Not ad-libbed, rather. You know, he does the other part in his head.
No, he was ad-libbing. Peter Sellers ad-libbed a lot.
Or rather ad-libbed, but I mean, it's so well done. Just his weird, like, yes, and yes, Dmitri. And I was watching it thinking, wow, there is nobody else on the other side of this telephone, but he is acting exactly like we've all been in that situation of, dude, shut up, let me get like one word in here, because I want to tell you about a nuke heading your way, and I don't want to talk about how nice it is to be nice.
Right, and also the premier is drunk and with his girlfriend, so he kind of has to get over that hurdle. But yeah, I mean, like, you don't ever call just to say hi is really funny. And then when the premier is saying that he's very sorry, and then the president's like, well, I'm sorry too. Well, don't say that I'm not as sorry as you are. I mean, the whole exchange is just fucking brilliant. It is really funny, and Peter Sellers liked to ad-lib, and Stanley Kubrick really liked to get a lot of takes from his actors. That's kind of what he's known for as a director, and Peter Sellers didn't want to give multiple takes because he felt like he nailed it once and then was done, or he would do another take, but it would be very different. So it wasn't going to be the same thing. So that kind of forced Kubrick to pick the best choice, which, you know, he had good stuff. Also, we should mention that Peter Sellers was supposed to play a fourth role. He was supposed to play Major Kong, the character that was played by Slim Pickens. Apparently, Sellers did some rehearsals in the airplane, or maybe even did some shooting in the plane, but then he injured himself and he's like, I can't do this. This is a lot of work for one movie. So he ultimately only did 3 roles, and it came from the studio. Apparently, he played a couple of roles in Lolita. I've never seen that movie.
It's another Kubrick film.
Yes, and apparently also a dark comedy. But the studio felt that Peter Sellers in multiple roles made Lolita a hit. So that's why they kind of forced Kubrick to do that again here. I think it's fine that he's only 3 and that he's not also the fourth role of Major Kong, mainly because everything that happens on that plane is not a joke. All of those scenes are played completely straight. Like, the one laugh is when they're kind of going through everything that's in their survival kit, and it's, you know, 9 packs of gum and 2 prophylactics and pet pills and sleeping pills and trank pills and all of those different things. That's mildly funny. But those guys, they're not in on the joke. And I think that's very much by design. You don't want to be laughing at them. These guys are good military soldiers. They're going to complete their mission no matter what. And that's terrifying given everything else that's happening in the movie, but you don't want to be laughing at them. So I think it kind of works better for the overall comedy of the movie as a whole, that those guys aren't funny, and that therefore one of them was not played by Peter Sellers, who probably would have made it funnier.
I think it works that it's not Sellers, because I think that character is very funny. Not funny. You're right. It's a straight character until the end, where he's just kind of insane with that iconic H-bomb with the cowboy hat.
Also, James Earl Jones in his film debut in this movie. He's like a baby face.
I did not even know James Earl Jones was in this film.
Oh, yeah. He's one of the guys on the plane. And Kong kind of references the fact that one of the guys on the plane is black when he's saying that we're all going to be heroes. We're all going to get commendations. For everyone on the plane, regardless of your race or creed, he's basically saying, yes, even you, I forget what his character's name is, but yes, even you, the black guy, you will get a medal too. Because this was 1964, and that was not necessarily a foregone conclusion. But James, let me ask you, on our 400th episode, Do you think that Dr. Strangelove stands the test of time?
Sometimes you watch one of these films, one of the older ones, and I'll be a little bit embarrassed if I don't like it, or I'm like, this is a classic. I guess it was okay, sort of. But I have to say, watching this film, I thought it was very well made, and it still stands up. And now we're talking about nukes in space, but Armageddon is on our minds. Whether or not Russia's instability in Europe, and or viruses, or global warming, there's always going to be something that mankind could be doing. The first half of the film really deals with Captain Mandrake. He's trying to get from the insane general. He's trying to get this code so that he can withdraw the bombers and whatnot. And they say at one point that there's over 17,000 permutations of this code. So it'll take the computers over 2.5 days to break it. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you couldn't even come close to saying that with a straight face today. You'd have to say, there's 2.8 trillion combinations, so it would take a week for the computers to do it.
I don't know about that. They have to communicate those 3-letter codes to the pilot. You have to transmit it, and they have to hear it. So it's not just like running a computer program where, you could try all of them instantly.
Oh, okay. I like that. Okay. There was one piece of trivia that I read, and there's a line when they're reviewing some of the survival packs. The captain goes, "A fella could have a pretty good weekend in Vegas with this kind of stuff." And apparently the original line was, "A fella could have a pretty good weekend in Dallas with all this stuff." And people didn't really want to talk about Dallas. It was a somber place. But I was even thinking when I saw that thing, I'm like, Dallas? What a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
Austin is the fun city in Texas you want to go to. So I just thought that was interesting. Wow, back then Dallas was known as the New Orleans, Las Vegas, New York kind of party Miami kind of city there. But overall, you need to pay attention a little bit. It's not as spoon-fed to you as the plot could be today. I thought it was a little confusing what was going on with the army kind of invading another American army base, but then it quickly was explained to me. It was funny, and when a film that's 60 years old can make me laugh, I think that's a pretty good accomplishment. It made me laugh, and it made you think, and it's and the movie ends. I mean, the movie ends with nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah.
It goes there, and it says, "Yep, they fucked up, and now everyone dies." And I think that's one of the first films to kind of show not necessarily America's bad, but it's one of these Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Hey, this weapon that we're still maybe celebrating ended the worst war we've ever seen. It may not always be a great thing, and you have to be really careful with this. And so for all that, I think the messages in the movie stands the test of time. What do you think, Al? Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb? Do you think it stands the test of time?
Oh, fuck yeah. This movie is genius. It is really, really funny. I agree with you about how comedies don't always age well. We've seen it many, many times, but this movie had me laughing out loud 60 years after it was made. Absolutely, it stands the test of time. I mentioned the fear of nuclear war being less prevalent. The other thing that I think leapt out at me from a test of time perspective is early in the movie, Ripper tells Mandrake to confiscate all radios. And then Mandrake is confiscating one radio, but it switches on and he hears just normal music, which makes him think that the world isn't ending and there aren't nuclear bombs flying every which way. Nowadays, it would be cell phones, and it would be pretty easy to pull out your phone from your pocket and find out if bombs are flying. Although I think it would be an easy thing to write around that on this particular base, the insane general turned off the Wi-Fi, he destroyed the cellular tower or whatever, and so they have no way of connecting. At the end of the movie, when they're talking about the mines and they're going to have to go into these mines to, repopulate the earth, I think it's a little bit unbelievable from a test of time perspective that there aren't already bunkers already built for people to go into to survive a nuclear attack that the president would know about, and that there would be some kind of system already in place. And, you know, it works fine for the movie and the comedy as they're talking about how they're going to develop the system and who's going to go into the mines. But I think nowadays we would expect, if a movie was talking about that, yeah, there's already these shelters and we know where to go and we know who to bring and we have them already stocked with plants and wildlife and seeds and all of those things. One other thing is that some of those shots of the plane look pretty bad, just kind of sped up footage because they needed to show the plane going fast, and it kind of looked like those bad flying shots from Superman 4. There were a couple of moments like that in the movie, but I'm nitpicking. This movie is fantastic. It's really fucking funny. It's really smart. It makes a very good point. We're always just one fucking psycho away from total annihilation. The wrong dude, if he can't get it up, we could all die. That's terrifying and believable and funny. And yeah, it really, really cracks me up. I love this movie.
So speaking of men with erectile dysfunction could destroy the earth, don't forget to vote for one of the septo or octogenarian presidential nominees this November.
I mean, obviously I have made my political bias very clear on this show. I feel like it's more likely that Trump would be more angry about a bad sexual encounter that would lead to Armageddon. I feel like Biden just doesn't care anymore.
Actually, recently Biden said the secret to his great marriage with Jill Biden is apparently great sex.
Oh.
So, go Joe.
Go Joe and go Jill. That's awesome. Is Trump getting laid? I mean, with all of these court appearances, where the fuck is Melania? Has anyone seen Melania in ages?
Oh, he's getting laid. I don't think it's from Melania. I mean, I was wondering, who is he sleeping with in the White House? I don't know, but it wasn't Melania.
Right. Well, that's going to do it for us this week. That's going to do it for episode 400. Next week, we are going to talk about Splash, the Tom Hanks, Daryl Hannah movie. Have you ever seen Splash, James?
I've never seen this film.
I'm pretty sure I saw it as a kid, but I don't think I've seen it in 35 to 40 years, give or take. So I'm looking forward to revisiting that movie. In the meantime, guys, we want to hear from you. We are at Testing Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads. Drop us a line, say hi. You can congratulate us for episode 400 if you want to, whatever. You could also leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars on whatever app you're listening to us on. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.